Thank you, Veronique. We need the speakers, the presenters to come forward, come up here, and get a question up to the panelists. Kasaini, you have to come up here. You have to get some question. Veronique, you too.
Oh, there? I'm coming.
No, I want to see you from here and then query. Of course, time. You have microphones there. I'm going to put this in front of you. So this way you have. This is where you have to give a question to the panel, and we have that. There's this project. Test it. Check.
Testing 1, 2.
Yes, it.
So I actually wanted to ask, maybe this is my question, but specifically I think
Sorry, can you use the microphone in front of you? There's one in front of you there.
So I wanted to ask the review specifically, I think one thing that was kind of missing a lot from what was happening today was any conversation about queerness, queer theory, queer identity.
Oh, you asking the whole house?
These three. Okay, or whoever wants to answer. But specifically, I think it'd be really interesting within everything that you all have talked about, you three have talked about, an intersection of queerness and how, like, the digital reality, for me, as like a transgender Asian American, I was able to find my identity online. And that was something that I had access to in my generation that people did not before. Celebrating queerness here in a place where many of us who move here don't have access to this level of visibility or freedom in our home country, or safety, like even from USA, it's very unsafe for people like me. And then when you're talking about like the Pan-Africanism here, any observations you have seen as far as people coming from their countries being able to be openly queer in whatever way. I'm just curious to hear what you have to say about that.
I'm sorry, do you mind if I just restate your question? Your question is essentially, from the topics that were presented today, how would we place queer identity, specifically Black trans queer identity?
Maybe not specifically Black trans, just in general.
In general, queer identity within the discussion of Pan-Africanism, and for my case, it would be Pan-Africanism and connectivity.
Yeah,
Are you answering the question?
No, I was just clarifying
No,
that.
but another clarification is you don't have to answer that question if it's too much for you. You don't have to say things you don't even know anything about. You don't have to guess, it's okay. I can speak for the organization that we will take that into consideration, that we should include LGBTQ presentation in our work next time. We'll try to do that. In fact, we'll call on you. So thank you. So anyway, you okay with that, brother? Assistant?
We can also address the question. So I'll take the floor. I'll say my experience here in Taiwan as an advocate for the Pan-African movement, that I've seen several individuals from our Caribbean community come to Taiwan and find a space that they can represent themselves as how they advocate for their sexuality, their identities, and find comfort in the fact that Pan-Africanism in Taiwan forces us to dispel some of the biases that we've had, that we've come into this nation having from our own traditional spaces, our own national levels of interpretation of what sexuality and identity means. And because we are such a small community here, we are forced to confront misconceptions, misgivings that we have of certain things. And it definitely is a central theme of what I do as an event organizer here in Taiwan, where we have to create safe spaces for everyone in our community community, and it forces the questions, it forces the tough decisions, it forces you to have a more open interpretation on things that in a separate space one would not confront. And that's it.
Okay, I think I want to say something that is directly in opposition to that. From my friends who are here, who are queer, a lot of people have a problem with a lot of the different Black social gatherings where they're saying that they want to hear the music, they want to vibe, they want to have a good time, but there's a problem with the homophobia in this space. And maybe there are people who are confronting it while they're living abroad and coming across like a new way of perceiving it, and maybe those people are not really. They don't think that they think that they're open and they're open-minded, but perhaps the way it's being communicated is not necessarily one that leads to a feeling of community and closeness. So I would say, in my experiences with conversations with my friends about all these various things, that there is a lot of space for growth, and that is one of the reasons we had Black Queer Pride Taiwan, because we recognized that within this smaller community, and Taiwan is really pretty good for its queer representation, there is a problem of anti-Blackness within it. And that is something that you do need to have I want to say a more structured space with a place where you have an ability to, if there's an issue happens, you have an idea of what you're going to do, right? So it's not necessarily the idea of the space doesn't exist or people aren't changing their minds about it or people aren't confronting biases by living abroad. I think it's more of a situation where the idea of what safety means and how you can enforce safety in a physical space is different for different peoples. That's my answer.
Any other question? Any other question? Yes. Yeah, so move forward. Use microphone. Use microphone.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to commend all the presenters who did a beautiful job. The second presenter is the first presenter is the one in the middle. Your presentation was refreshing. Please don't change your name, even if I called it wrong. And the last presenter, I think your presentation actually answered the question she threw at the first presenters. I don't know the
first one.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what she asked at that time was how would we advance the cause of Pan-Africanism? And a few responses were given, but they could have answered certain parts or answered certain parts. But I'm thinking that you could leverage on the social media to reach out to the youth. There are so many brilliant Africans outside of Nigeria. They've learned so much. They've read around Africa and the problems and all that. But you cannot, be outside Africa and help Africa without reaching Africa through a medium. And when she was making her presentation, we discovered that Africa, I think, has the least use of social media. I don't know. And then there are some, she did that, I saw it there. And then what I'm trying to say is that even if we are not rich enough to use social media, we should use that opportunity to reach out to the Gen Zs, like she asked, because some of them do not even know the problems we're going through. They've lost, I think I would say that African operates a lost heritage. So we can, kind of educate the youth, the children, the Gen Zs, about Pan-Africanism using the social media. Thank you very much and well done to the presenters.
No, sorry. If that's that ability or form of me, sorry. However, my question will be brief. Well, there is an issue of misinformation with respect to hate speech and the like, with respect to Internet of Things and Internet in general. So how are you going to manage it, even when it has been advocated to use social media to reach out to this? So my question will now be, can we start by bridging this gap by connecting with the town, what we call town and town relationship? For example, this poster is for the organizers of the program, where I expected to have seen more of the town. Probably we have diaspora meetings here, associations from different African bloc, Nigerian bloc, Kenyan bloc, and the people that equally reach out to them. However, I wouldn't know whether they are not invited or they had other things to do. So we could start by fiscal contact, the fiscal infrastructure she talked about, where she was talking about the Internet of Things. So the town-down relationship, inviting these people, conscientizing, reconscientizing them on the need for Pan-Africanism, we then take down to the families, to their people, to the young ones at that level. Then we now face the issue of social media, which is the internet, because of misinformation and disinformation, equally a lot of social hate speech that goes on in the internet. I wouldn't know if there is a connection to the presenters, especially the
person I told you. All right. Well, I'm going to answer you. That seems to be question of the organizers. Are you fine with that? Okay.
I can. I think you're talking about the thing I touched on very briefly, right? So the algorithm oppression. And there is a lot of work that talks about the idea of anti-blackness being the basis for the internet and social media usage. So you have the idea of like digital blackface, you have digital vaccines, etc. Is that what you're talking about there?
Not actually. What I mean, issue about town-down relationship, I'm talking about the people here, basically our people who are here either for business, for economic migrants and the likes. There are people who are here for different businesses or different opportunities. They could have been a important part of the program to be involved in to participate actively in the program. I think that's the aspect I was talking about. With respect to misinformation, hate speech and the likes, it's obvious that all that happens in the internet are not actually the ratings. The internet presents the opposite of, especially as 40% of what you see online, the narratives, the online identity people create and what have you, really they promote hate speech and they don't really speak to things as they are. So how do we deal with it? Is a challenge, a big one at that.
That's not like a legislative issue. I think probably it would be the idea of the users being protected by the different governments and being able to hold these individual companies responsible. Because one example of how hate speech has had a problem, we can talk about Facebook and Meta, where you have in Myanmar there was I don't know if the word was genocide, but part of it was that hatred was kind of fed by Facebook because they weren't taking the complaints seriously of the hateful acts that was used against different groups of people. So it's something that I think it's not necessarily from us. I think that is a legislative government responsibility.
Well, can I just make one point? Because in the morning we were talking about education, how can we educate our children, future generation. So maybe at this point we should also add media literacy. Because it's one thing to have children and then you have the low usage of the internet. You increase it, all young people start using the internet, but they do not know how to digest all the information and they just get misled. So with our education program, we need to add some more media literacy.
Yes.
So this morning we had a very interesting conversation. I think Nathaniel asked a question. So, and that's what she was trying to explain. So, Kai was talking about the aesthetic of Pan-Africanism, right? And you were talking about Pan-Africanism as an ongoing social practice. And you talked about digital. So, the main question that I think, Latando, you can explain it again if you want. She was saying, how do we use Pan-Africanism, move it from theory to practice? She mentors a lot of young Africans whose problems are practical, survival. Like how do they develop, create jobs and things like that? Is that what the question was?
Yeah. Sort of like personal and professional development,
Yes.
which I think if we are talking about Pan-Africanism and we're saying we're for people from African and Caribbean roots, or just in the diaspora driving, then we should be thinking about how to equip individuals, not as here we're talking about groups, but really when we get to the ground, we have to talk about individuals. How are you helping this person embrace Pan-Africanism, and while they're embracing Pan-Africanism, thrive in the process?
So, all right. You want to say more of that?
That's the question for the panel.
Now, in my studies to address this beautiful audience today, a lot of it centered around how Pan-Africanism was interpreted 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago when the movement was most active. That also coincided with a period of time where people actually had to physically interact with news and we had to go out to get our information. Now, in an increasingly digital age, we are bombarded with sites, links, sending us to several different spaces that, like our compatriot rightfully mentioned, that we need some training when it comes to dealing with media and internet literacy specifically. Now, one of the most polarizing things I find when it comes to Pan-Africanism in the 21st century is how do we address advocating for our community while also educating people about our community. One of those steps needs to happen first, and usually, well, given the advent of social media in the super form that it is now, people are confronted with pieces of information, data that they can't really filter through a lens until they have context. So I feel like where we're at now as young people advocating for Pan-Africanism as a practice, not just as a theory, that we need to build that grounding, that foundation, that we understand that we're moving towards this for us with an objective in mind, and it's not just some abstract concept that we see again on social media that's put in front of our face that we don't understand. Yeah.
Thank you. You want to add to that?
I want to do it for Rob because I think, please correct me if I'm wrong. If I heard you right, you said you were an event organizer, right?
Right.
Yes. So I'm dealing with a lot of students. I came to Taiwan when I was 18. So I also was told at home that when you go to university, you'll be free to do whatever you want. So when I got here, you can imagine that I went to a couple of parties, but I'm over that stage now, right? So I know that if I call students for a conference, only a few of them come. But if I tell them that it's going down somewhere, it's going to be a party, everybody, even the broke ones, the ones that have to go and borrow money, still make it stay. So how do we work with you? How do I, as someone who understands that yes, there's a time for playing, and I think early and late, just like I said, I came when I was 18, particularly a teenager, right? So I know that between maybe 18 and 22, you still want to play, you still have your studies, but you don't really have a lot of responsibilities in life, right? But also that's the time in your life when you could be building wealth and everything, right? So how do we make sure that you and I work together so that they balance board? They're not just strictly nerds, which is in our community, being a nerd is worse than having worse than having COVID mania, or any other disease, So how do we find a balance where we put fun and personal and professional development together so that it's not a one thing and then not the other. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense.
Sorry, before you answer that question, I'm going to use my power here. He's going to answer that question very well, but I want you to prepare for that question. Prepare yourself very well. He's smart, he will do it, but I'm going to give him more chance. And for now, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, and answer that question. And then also, there's food left in the kitchen. If you want to take food home, there's a wrap for you. No, that's okay. The caterer left food for us to take home. The single guys, if you're single, I'm married, I'm food at home. You don't have food at home, you can take food home. Now, for now, we're going to short break, please, and we'll get back to that. Thank you, everybody. Please take care.